Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. So if you're a regular listener of Coast View, you know that during COVID, I made incredible connections into the healthcare community. Obviously, that was one of our, claims to fame in coastal Mississippi, as we responded so well to COVID. And, the difficult days, the early days, and then it was supposed to get a little less contagious and a little less deadly. And then we get this Delta thing that, as Dr. Nicholas Conger explained, kind of took us off into a really difficult time. Thank God the changes in coronavirus since then have been much less deadly, a lot less hospitalizations, as you learned from Dr. Conger this week. But, I've really gotten into talking to leadership at Memorial Hospital, leadership at Singing River, and the Singing River Health System. And if you're a regular listener, you know this, but Lee Bond, the former CEO of Singing River, I'd worked in the community with him, and I thought he did a terrific job of taking a hospital that was in a lot of financial trouble and kind of bringing it and putting it on the map. You've got a lot of long-term employees that work there that have seen tremendous change. You've seen it continue to branch out. So you've got the Singing River position that they've always had in Pascagoula, and then, of course, Ocean Springs, and then more recently Garden Park. You've seen some really innovative strategic alignment with Ochsner over in New Orleans. I got to know that health system really well when I was publisher at the Times-Picayune. And I must also note that Shannon Wall, who was the former publisher of the Sun Herald, I was the former publisher of the Sun Herald. I had the benefit of helping to hire her at the Sun Herald, and think the world of Shannon, and she's obviously in a key position at the hospital. You may have heard more recently, though, that Singing River is looking for strategic partners or potentially the sale. We'll talk more specifically here about this shortly, but I wanted to bring Tiffany Murdock, who's the current CEO of Singing River Health System. I want to get to know her better, but I want to understand what's going on with this very unique nonprofit hospital that the Board of Supervisors in Jackson County has to say grace over. So with all that said, let me welcome Tiffany Murdock to Coast View. How are you doing, Tiffany?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you so much for what you did for us during COVID. I mean, you got the messages out there. You pounded the pavement on getting what we needed to get from a communication standpoint. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to spend time with Dr. Roth, with your head of nursing. I actually came over and went to the ICU, spent some time there. At the time, the surgical ICU was also an ICU for COVID patients, and you even had overflow in a couple of rooms down in the emergency room. And it was a difficult time, but I got to see it with my own eyes. I had carte blanche ability to talk with some of your employees about what they were facing. It helped me understand it better, helped me communicate better to the community why it was important for people to get vaccinated and avoid, if they can, the serious illness, particularly those with pre-existing conditions. But I have a special connection to Singing River, and I particularly have enjoyed watching you guys advance over the years, which I think has been incredible. It's been something to behold. Now, you are now the CEO. You have been with Singing River for a short period of time. I want to tell your history a little bit, and then we'll get a little bit more into what's going on with the hospital these days. Okay. So where did you grow up, Tiffany?
So I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama, or Sims, Alabama. So I grew up there, and I just remember my mom and dad saying, "We're going to the boats this weekend. You're staying with your grandparents." So that's how I knew the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
That's I spent time in Mobile as the publisher of the newspaper there, and I have a cousin who now lives in Sims, Alabama.
Different Sims. We were one stoplight.
Right. I used to own a bad boy buggy, which is a hunting vehicle, and the service guy actually had a place there in Sims, and I would drive over there on a pretty regular basis and see him, and he was terrific, and that's cool. But yeah, I know that area really well. But you've had the opportunity to during your time to get ready for this position. Give people a sense of the track that you went on that led to you becoming CEO of Singing River Hospital System.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent most of my executive career, obviously, on the West Coast. So I left to finish my doctorate in San Francisco in the Bay Area. and was over St. Joe's. I was a CNO over St. Joe's and then in Oregon. And then, Lee called me. I was literally just traveling. I had just had my first baby, and I was traveling, and he was like, I've seen your resume, and is there any way possible you can come? And so I started my career after that, meeting Heath Thompson as the executive director over all the ORs, so all the procedural areas, L&D, did that. And then 2 years ago, October 2020, I took over the role over what was Garden Park and is now Singing River Gulfport. So I was the administrator for that facility, worked with a partnership with Ochsner for that facility. And then, obviously end of February went to the interim position, and then 4 weeks is the permanent. So I've gotten to, I've been very lucky. I've been a part of, the conversation around partnerships since 2016, and, just the strategic pathway to get to, fast forward to 2022.
Well, it's amazing what you guys have done from an innovative point of view. I should point out you joined the organization in 2016. You have a couple of kids. You and your husband Oliver live in Ocean Springs, and you've been super active in the community. But what's interesting, if you look at, I mentioned to you that my brother-in-law had heart surgery at Ocean Springs by one of the top heart surgeons in the country.
Yep.
You've done incredibly well in oncology. The relationship between what is now, it was a former Garden Park and what is now Singing River Gulfport and Ochsner is very innovative. In fact, it created a lot of confusion, which we had to fix, because a lot of people thought the Ochsner bought Singing River of some sort. So how do you describe that partnership to people who are confused about it?
Well, it's interesting because we have, there's like this infamous SPA that everyone talks about, but it's our strategic partnership agreement. And what we wanted to do was almost, kind of form a microcosm of what a larger integration would look like. And they have the outpatient setting. So they really came in and dedicated an infrastructure for outpatient primary care, all of the pediatric subspecialties and OB and women's services. And then we own the hospital. So they own, a lot of the outpatient facilities, and we own the hospital. But, to be able to bring those two kind of powerhouse health systems together in the middle of COVID, like the worst part of COVID, and come out and turn that facility around with a census of 10 to a census of 90 and 100. I mean, that can show you what a bigger partner can do.
Yeah, and in that relationship, it leads to who knows what else. I mean, what they've done with cancer treatment, what they've done with transplants. Of course, I mean, their cardiac part is kind of what put them on the map initially. But from just a care point of view, having that integration for very unique cases that need maybe a level of specialization is not available at Singing River, it's a natural fit, isn't it?
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the quaternary care, we can do, the heart surgeries, we can do the cats, all of the high-end cancer care. But if we want a transplant or a neurosurgeon, at least we have that, one-stop shop call to have the conversation about, hey, we have a patient, we need to get them to you now.
Very cool. Now, what's interesting about the Singing River Health System, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it is literally a nonprofit. Yes. And it's a unique setup where, in the current scenario, the county has the sort of oversight of this nonprofit. So the Board of Supervisors has a lot of responsibility. There's a Board of Trustees, of course, that oversees, like this is the case with most nonprofits. I would actually say this is the case with every nonprofit. And then you have a CEO of the organization. And I think the community, as a general rule, those who've been around for a while, learned a lot about that process when Singing River was having some difficult times, some difficult financial times. But looking back on that now, Tiffany, it's amazing the corner that the hospital turned. And then not only to turn that financial corner, I guess part of the reason they turned the financial corner is just because they continued to get better as a hospital, became this incredible, go from a community hospital to this little healthcare facility that is very significant now. But it's an amazing story of a turnaround, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to go from this huge AR pension debacle that was going on, and then now, move 7, 8 years, 9 years forward, and you're a $500 million industry. You're the second largest employer in Jackson County. You can't really count yourself as a rural healthcare system anymore. I mean, you're giving high-end services that people travel from all around to come here in Jackson County and now in Harrison County to get these services.
It's an amazing story. And as I said at the beginning of the show, the more I learned about it, obviously spending time there, obviously COVID gave us a chance to look inside the organization more specifically. The dedicated employees, my God, unbelievable, the people that you're surrounded by. And most of the leaders that you're surrounded by were there before COVID. They're there during COVID, and certainly they're there after COVID. When you can keep your core team together, when you've done so much positive to make this hospital what it is today, that helps it be even more solid to sort of face the challenges that you face going forward. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with the CEO of Singing River Health Systems, Tiffany Murdock, and we'll talk specifically about sort of what's going on now as they look at strategic alternatives. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. We're joined by Tiffany Murdock, who's the CEO of Singing River Health Systems. Tiffany, I love your story because it makes me think about other CEOs that I've talked to from coastal Mississippi, where you're actually not from coastal Mississippi, but you're from the region. You're from Sims, Alabama. You get highly educated. You spend time in Oregon and California. You make your way back to coastal Mississippi, which is very close to Sims. I mean, you can get back to Sims from where you are now in 30 minutes.
Yes.
Especially on those back roads that we all know that virtually take you. If you don't get off to go to Sims, it'll eventually take you on to the airport. But anyway, the point is, though, it's great to see people like you, go see the world and come back. It gives you a great perspective, and you're highly educated. You're in a good position. So now let's talk specifically about the strategic partnership. And let me just frame it, and then you can kind of fill in the pieces. As I mentioned, this is a nonprofit owned by the county, essentially. The county oversees this nonprofit. The Jackson County Board of Supervisors has a very important role. There's a board of trustees. In this particular case, the board of trustees has made a decision to seek either the sale of the hospital or strategic partnerships. Will specifically give you what that looks like. The Jackson County Board of Supervisors hired Raymond James to do some assessments, and they came to the same conclusion the Board of Trustees came to, that this would be the best future strategic route for the hospital. So where Tiffany is today is she's in the process of seeking these potential partners, or maybe even the potential sale of Singing River. The only caveat is it has to remain a nonprofit. It won't be a scenario where it stays. It becomes sort of a for-profit hospital. If that were the route, actually, there would be a lot of suitors probably for the hospital. So with that said, Tiffany, kind of give me a sense, tell it from your point of view, give me some more details, and sort of where are you guys in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Board of Supervisors and Board of Trustees have been phenomenal. We have, kind of been going at this in tandem, working together to make sure that they have all the information that they need. The Board of Supervisors voted this last board meeting, 2 board meetings ago, to move forward with the process, which the next step in the process is to have a public hearing. And that public hearing is for people to come and ask questions, to explain, where we had our diligence and where we got the information. And then if that, after that, there's a 21-day of petition that, couldn't be signed. And then that would, if the 1,500 signatures are received, then that's what would trigger the referendum or the vote. And if there are not 1,500 signatures, then the process would move forward.
So it requires a referendum?
If there are 1,500 signatures received.
Oh, I understand. I got you. I knew that step. I misunderstood what you're saying. Okay, well, really good. So what could it look like? What when you're looking at a continuum of strategic partnerships versus a sale? What does that look like?
Well, I think from the supervisor standpoint and the trustees is that this public hearing and this vote will be around a sale. Like it will now the sale, what that sale may look like, could be over a time period, or it could have what we call the RFP process or the bid process. For the public is that we say we want a not-for-profit. We want, our employees to be taken care of. We, obviously the 2 number 1 things, no matter who we choose, the pension will be taken care of, the pension settlement will be taken care of, and the bond covenants will be taken care of. And then after that, having conversations with these partners around mental health, indigent care, cancer services, things like that. And so I think then we begin to build what the bid looks like.
So as you look across, if you cast the net across the United States and look at companies that are the kind of companies that could make something like this work, like Auctioner, for example. I don't know if that's a possibility, but certainly Auctioner is a good example of this. Are there a number of them? Because I happen to be aware of. It's not unusual to find non-profit hospitals across the United States. And of course, there's the for-profit side. But are there potentially a lot of suitors for this?
I mean, I think because we're coming at it from a place of strength instead of kind of waiting until, we've, we started a fire sale type situation, but we have a margin. We have a very strong medical staff. We're doing very well, and we're doing this because we know what's coming. I think we will have, a number of suitors. Again, we're post-COVID and a very expensive valuation for our health system. So, I know that, Auctioner is interested, and I'm sure that there are other not-for-profits, but I think one of the big things is we want someone who has local care in mind. So the people in Jackson, Harrison County still get the same great care and never have to leave.
Yeah, I know that's extremely important to the Board of Supervisors, the Board of Trustees, your team. I mean, you want it to be seamless. At the end of the day, if what happens is you can maintain the same level of service and in some respects actually even take it to the next level, right, that's a great outcome. And by the way, let's point out that for you to be able to say what your financial position is today relative to what other hospitals are saying, especially in the wake of COVID, that's a pretty significant statement to be able to make, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to come out of COVID with a margin is incredible. I mean, again, June was a tough month for us just because we're starting to see, dish recoupment and different, payers and our census and things moving from inpatient to outpatient. And so we're starting to see the headwinds that we explained to the Board of Supervisors, and so did Raymond James, those start to come to fruition. And we need to continue to maintain and grow, knowing that the margin is going to get smaller and smaller.
Yeah. A lot of public hospitals operate in the red. Some of them really big time in the red. But it's interesting just to look at the state of the medical, health care systems today across America. There are so many challenges when you think about pharmaceuticals and insurance companies and the role government's playing and the advance of technology. And the list just goes on and on. I don't know how you begin to compartmentalize it all.
Well, I think, you think about supply chain. We were spending 5 cents for a mask and now spending $5 for a mask. And I think, you have to break it off in chunks. And I think that's the reason we recommended to the trustees, the senior team, is that scale is really the only thing that fixes this. The more covered lives you had, I use the, scenario of Costco. You don't go to a convenience store and buy a bag of chips every time you make your kids lunch. If you go to Costco and you get 100 bags of chips for 10 cents a piece. And so, it's just the infrastructure that was healthcare fee for service is changed. It is no longer, and we have to move and change with it.
You're going to see remote care, which was something that everyone talked about. I remember actually the first time that I heard a really detailed explanation of where remote care was heading was actually in a meeting with the CEO of Auctioner, and he was explaining this a really important part of their strategic plan and how they were going to bring Auctioner out into rural communities and all that long before COVID. And then of course COVID happens, and now we all know what that means. Mm-hmm. But that's always going to be an important segment. And for a fine hospital like the Singing River Health Systems, it allows you to have patients that are not necessarily right there in your community. It could be pretty far away. It depends on, what those possibilities look like. But none of this is easy. Every bit of what we're talking about is going to require most likely scale, small hospitals and small communities will be challenged greatly. And there's going to be real challenges ahead for hospitals that don't have scale. And when we say scale, big, the ability to buy lots of quantities, the ability to solve problems along a large network of hospitals. When you're dealing with negotiations with insurance companies and all, I mean, I could go on, Tiffany, but it is a complicated world you're in these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to sit at the table with Blue Cross and have 100,000 lives versus 500,000 lives, and that's a very different conversation. And not to say that our the rates would change, but maybe the collaboration will change. I just think that even with that, we have a relationship now with Ocean Springs School District. And so just to add that scale to, telehealth, they never have to leave the school to, get care. But we have a small platform. Someone like Ochsner, they do probably more telehealth visits than they do, in-home visits. So, I mean, it's a different world, and they're not paying us more money, that's for sure.
Hey, so listen real quick. We're coming to the end, but the timeline on this, once the public comment is done, things will proceed pretty rapidly after that if you don't have a referendum.
Yeah, correct. I mean, the RFP is around 90 days, and then it takes at least 18 months for a full transaction. So, but once the dotted line is signed.
In the meantime, you have a hospital to manage.
Yeah.
You have employees to hire, employees to satisfy, and a team to hold together. And just going through this process introduces a whole nother set of challenges for leadership. But you guys have the right leadership team in place to deal with this. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I look forward to staying in touch, actually, as you guys get further down the road, and we'll make sure that people know the latest. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's nice to see you.
You bet. This has been Tiffany Murdock, the CEO of Singing River Health Systems, and we'll see you after this break.